Welcome to the Young Dentist Mentorship Library. I'm Stuart Anderson. On this episode, I spent about 40 minutes with financial wizard Rob Eagleston. Rob's claim to fame is that he spent the last 19 years working in the dental financial world. So he's seen dental professionals spend money and save money, what is working and what is not working. Let me read his mission statement. It says that Eagleston Financial Group is committed to helping individuals, families, and businesses protect what they deem as most important, and also to provide the tools and guidance necessary to assist clients as they work towards achieving their financial objectives. So in this episode, Rob works through a list of 10 things every young dentist needs to be doing or not doing when it comes to finances. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. Thanks for being with us, Rob.
Hey, Stuart, thanks so much. Always a pleasure to be with you. And just before I start, I can give just a brief introduction. Our headquarters are in Mesa, Arizona. This is where we live and spend most of our time. Although, as you mentioned, we do travel the country. We spend a lot of time on the road, going out and visiting and teaching and trying to mentor dentists of all ages, shapes, and sizes. Here's a quick view of my family, my 4 kids and wife. Partly I show you this just so you can become familiar with my family, but also I always tell groups I work with, family pictures can be a painful event. And if it gives you any consolation for those that love family pictures, I've been told by multiple accountants that if you give a business presentation and you insert a family picture, you can officially write off the picture session and pay your family members as models. So the full disclosure, I am not an accountant. I have not been audited to see if that passes the test, but I will take the word of the few accountants that have told me that.
That is the worst advice you could possibly.
No, and Stuart, I always enjoy being with you and kind of seeing what you do. What we share in common is that we both work we're part of family businesses. I started it's crazy to say, but I started just over 19 years ago. And, a lot of times my experience has been, and this holds true for dentists that go into business with family, the family route for some is just kind of an easy, convenient way to do it. Although I see some that get kind of stuck in a rut. That's, they get caught in almost that trap of working the family business, but not necessarily enjoying it. And one thing I've always noticed about you working, being a part of the Crown Council, being a partner there is you have a lot of passion for what you do. And for me, when I started, I'll honestly say back 19 years ago, is that when I started, I can't say that I was necessarily passionate about what I was doing. I was curious. I looked at it, I was single at the time. I looked at it as a way to make a living. But beyond that, I can't say I really had any passion at all. And probably the best thing that happened to me almost immediately is I was able to meet a client that my dad had worked with. He was a dentist who, at the time, I was living in Provo, Utah. He was living in Provo, Utah. And years before that, he was a dentist in Arizona, very successful, owned a practice. And just one day out of nowhere, he started to feel something going on in his hand, some numbness, went and got checked out and found out that he had MS. And that escalated quickly. It went from being diagnosed to having to sell his practice. And he was in a position within months where he couldn't practice dentistry at all. Here's a picture. He's right there in the middle. It's not a very good picture. It's one I pulled off of Facebook, but this is his entire family, his kids and grandkids. And when I went to see him up at his house. His wife answered the door and she took me to the front room, and he eventually made his way. She helped him in his wheelchair, and we just sat and we talked and she was very emotional, and just what I saw was the effects of the positive effects of all the planning that they had done, previous to his disability, everything that he'd put in place, everything that he'd done. had put he and his family in a position to continue living. And I mean, obviously he would have preferred to stay in Arizona and continue to own and run his successful dental practice. But what I saw is there was a tremendous difference made in his life because of the work that my dad had done. So I left that house kind of shaken, but what it did is just it really did help infuse passion and help me see the difference that I could make, in others' lives. And so that was, although it was, again, extremely sad and tragic, it was a good thing, a really good thing for me. And not too long before I started, so I started in May of 1999, about 5-6 months before that, actually it was December of 1998, December 23rd, wouldn't forget that. I was boarding a flight that was leaving Phoenix, going to Salt Lake City. And this was back in the day. Those listening may not know this, but Southwest had seats that were facing each other.
No, they did not.
Oh yeah. This is what it looked like. And if you can imagine, it was incredibly awkward to be sitting there for, sometimes hours, just staring at someone you didn't even know. Well, I boarded a flight that was leaving at 6:30 a.m. I was the last one on the plane, which, if you know me, that's pretty typical of my travel habits. And instead of sitting in the back of the plane, figuring that was going to be the only seat, I noticed that the only seat available was right at the front, right across from this guy here. So this is Sean Bradley. He's 7'6". And I was, I'm a basketball fan, I'm a sports fan. So it was pretty cool, actually. So I got to sit across from him, and the flight from Phoenix to Salt Lake is about an hour and a half. So he was kind enough the entire time to entertain questions. We talked, and the question that I asked him that I was curious about was, to that point in his career, he'd been playing for a number of years. What was most surprising to him, about playing in the NBA? And he didn't hesitate when he answered that what surprised him most was the amount of players who on paper, their contracts were paying millions of dollars, but the amount of those individuals that had no money, that were practically bankrupt. And he wasn't talking about guys that had retired and 10 years later. He was talking about guys that in that moment literally had not a dime to their name. And this caught me off guard. I was thinking, there are other answers that I was thinking he was going to give, but that's what he gave. And he just went on to explain that he said there's so many players that they came from high school, or they came straight from college, and they have no background in money and finances. And all they know is that they signed a contract for $1 million. So they're going to go spend $1 million and then realize at some point that you got to pay taxes, that they've overcommitted. And he said, you start a pattern and habit right away that financially is destructive, that they never recover from. And that does answer the question. I mean, I do see a lot of professional athletes. We hear about actors, individuals that in their careers made multi-million dollars, but we hear about them filing bankruptcy and falling on hard times. And so that made a lot of sense to me. There's a statistic here, and there's actually a lot of statistics that are pretty scary when you talk about retirement that involve the general population or dentists specifically. And they all just lead to the fact that there are very few individuals that make it through their career, including dentists, and get to a point where they can comfortably retire, where they've done what they needed to do to have enough money to live comfortably. And so kind of going back to Sean Bradley, and you see this picture here, here's a dental class. Everyone is probably excited and smiling, happy to be done, excited to start practicing and making a living, and they should be. Everyone in this picture has every reason to be excited and confident that they're going to go out and reach all their financial goals. But then you wonder, fast forward 20, 30, 40 years, why is it that potentially so many from this group, or why is it that almost every time I go speak somewhere, to just any event, a study club, CE course, to a group of dentists have been practicing sometimes 10, 20, 30 years. Why is it that almost everyone that comes up is lost, confused, scared, frustrated when it comes to money, when it comes to retirement or financial security? And it's just the recurring theme that we see over and over and over again. And I don't say all this to be negative or to strike fear. It's just the simple reality that we see. Kind of like, again, going back to Sean Bradley and these NBA players, we have all these dentists out there that are very successful, that generate a lot of money in their practices, that have great families, that are great owners, that the employees love them, the community loves them. But you start peeling the layers back and you see that financially there's a lot of turmoil there, and again, a lot of uncertainty. So we've, instead of just kind of sitting back and witnessing this, we've taken an active role, and I've always been curious my entire career, where does this go wrong? And what tips can we offer, especially to these younger dentists, to put them on the right course, to make their kind of financial path a lot smoother, a lot easier. And these are the questions that we get all the time. We'll go out and speak to dental schools and residency programs, so groups of younger dentists, and they want to know, hey, I don't want to make the same mistake that my dad made, or my uncle, or the dentists that I talk to that are looking at bankruptcy or not even close to retirement. So help me out here. Well, for one thing I learned early on in my career, and this was back in about 2004, 2005, I had a friend that was going to San Antonio, and he kind of strong-armed me into visiting the school and speaking to the students. And being the big fan that I was of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I figured, hey, if I can go check out the Alamo and see the sights of San Antonio, then that was kind of my motivation. But I wasn't completely motivated to go speak to this group of dental students. That's something that we hadn't done. But then when I went back there, and he actually had graduated, and so after he graduated, we both went back the next year and spoke to the students, interacted, talked to them, and that's when I realized, and even more so when I went to the second and third schools, that, here you see in dental school, this is a picture of what you learn. You learn to pass the boards, to be a dentist, to treat patients. And that's a great thing. And that's when, if you're a dentist, you need to learn that somewhere. But with no exceptions, we found, and since then we've traveled to several schools across the country, and it's the same gripe or the same issue. Or these students and eventually new dentists are kind of complaining that, hey, in dental school, we learned basically to pass our boards, but now that we're out practicing and we have other issues like, what insurance policies to buy, and how do we manage our loans? What do we do about retirement? None of that stuff was even touched upon. Some schools will spend a few days or a week on it, but considering how important that is to your overall success, I understand the frustration. I also understand from the school's point of view why they can't take adequate time to teach that. But bottom line is that it's not taught in dental school, and it'll never be taught in dental school. Some have the advantage before school. Maybe they owned a business of some sort, they took some business classes, have a good business background, but otherwise everyone else is in the same boat of being somewhat lost. And so just looking at, I came up with a list that I didn't think more than just a couple minutes to come up with. These are just some items if you want to know, hey, what's at the root of these problems? Where does it go wrong, or why does it go wrong for all these dentists out there? Financial disorganization, lifestyle. Just recently, we had a graduate from a dental school who, right before he graduated, he went out and bought a $7,000 a month Ferrari. And
no, he didn't.
Don't get me wrong. Oh yeah, no. And don't get me wrong. It's a cool looking car. Part of me, in a weird way, understands when and I'm not a big sports car guy, but still, it's a pretty slick looking car. And I can show you the Instagram post to prove it. It was basically saying, I'm so happy that I'm in this profession that allows me to do this. And so in other words, he owed it to himself.
That allows him to have a Ferrari?
Yes. So,
okay, continue.
So for better or worse, he's just started practicing, and he's driving a really nice car to and from. And that's kind of on one end of the spectrum. We don't see too many decisions that are that crazy, out of the gates, but with lifestyle, you do see it's very common that students graduate and then feel entitled. Hey, I've been for years, including high school and undergrad, I've been living a certain way, and now I'm making money, and it's time to just get the floodgates going. It's time to live and to travel and to buy the house that I've always wanted to buy and drive the cars. And we're not here to tell you, the nice thing about the dentistry profession is that anyone that's a dentist is, up near the top as we look at our country as a whole in wage earners, and which just means you make more money than most everybody else, which means that you should be able to enjoy things such as cars and clothes and restaurants and travel. But like anything, there should be a limit to all that. But lifestyle for some becomes a problem real quick. Family expenses, as your family grows and expands, that gets to be more expensive. We're not saying don't have families, but that's a reason why life gets expensive. Failure, kind of like with these NBA players, failure to consider the impact of taxes. So if you come out of school and you're promised a salary of a guarantee of $10,000 a month or whatever that may be, that doesn't mean you have $10,000 to spend every month. That's $10,000 before any of the taxes, before you have to make your loan payments. Just poor investment performance. Sometimes clients just have bad luck. Risk management, that's in the category of insurance. Again, kind of going along with number 6 there. At times things will go wrong, and if you're not properly protected, that can magnify and compound the problem. Undisciplined, that can tie to lifestyle. Again, some just get on a roll and it's a snowball effect, and you got to keep up with the Joneses or whatever the deal is. But some clients are simply just like a lot of dentists, and this is again another big reason why we see problems is everything turns into an emotional decision, which doesn't always end well. Inefficient or no tax planning. A lot of clients learn the hard way 3, 4, 5 years into practice that you certainly can save on money if you don't hire an accountant, hire a professional accountant who works with dentists to guide you and advise you on tax needs. But the irony is that you'll 99 times out of 100 end up spending a lot more money because of just lack of knowledge on how to implement and use the tax code as it applies to you. So we encourage all clients to employ professionals. And when it comes to accountants, find someone that specifically works with, not who's an accountant period, but an accountant that works with dentists and understands the dental world, how it applies to the tax code. And number 10 is an interesting one. A lot of our clients who are lost and confused, they couldn't tell you within sometimes $50,000 what they even make. They don't know what life costs. They don't know what they make. They just know that, as far as they know, that they make enough to cover all of their bills, and that's all that matters. So when it comes time to making a significant financial decision, sometimes you want to know, well, can I afford this? Does this make sense? Well, if you have no idea how much additional cash flow you have, you would never be able to make a sound decision. So then it goes back to making the emotional decision. Like, well, I don't know if I can afford this Ferrari, but I want it. So I'm just going to finance it, or I'm going to work out the payments and make it work. So this is just a quick list, and I'm not going to go through and cover everything here, but this is just, 10. And if we spend another hour, we could come up with probably 30 or 40 more. But as clients who are out of school, into practice, and they just kind of move down the road in their career, come up and we start talking, and I start asking questions about their situation and where they're at. For most of them, in their head, this is kind of what everything looks like. It's just a kind of a jumbled mess. And it's very easy to lose track of, well, I forget what I had with my insurance. And then I had a couple different loans. And let's see, I own a house. So I have got that mortgage and then a second mortgage. And I've got bank accounts tied to personally me. And I've got business accounts. And so and this is the problem. We talk about disorganization. When you actually see this in action on a client's desk, this isn't actually a client's desk. I've got clients that as I go to see them, this is kind of what it looks like. They've got stuff everywhere in different file cabinets and drawers, and some things at home, some things at the office. And this is, for some clients, this is the number one reason why they get stuck, why they get frustrated, why they don't want to take time to figure their financial life out, is because everything is simply such a mess. And it's a big stumbling block. I recently had a client who has a huge dental practice, very successful. About 3 years ago, he was inches away from filing a bankruptcy, and told me, he said, when it came to financial matters, I was in such a mess and disarray that I just pushed it aside. And I only dealt with things when they became a really big problem, like something was going to be canceled, or they were going to come repossess something. Then I dealt with it. But he said, otherwise, I tried to just get it out of the way because I didn't even know how to tackle it. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, in this day and age with technology, there's a lot of ways to avoid that financial clutter and mess. I mean, again, very simple concept, just to get clean and organized. But for many clients, it's impossible to do. But if you take some time and consider all the resources we have now with technology, this is a software program that we use, that we pay for and provide to any of our clients, that it's just a tool. It's an organizational tool. Some clients will do mint.com. Some clients have programs through maybe their bank that allow them to just go in and through the internet, digitally store everything. It's cloud-based, maybe have an app on their phone, so that when it comes time to make decisions, when it comes time to plan, you actually have some idea, where things are and where you stand with things. So, and the best time to do all this really is actually in dental school, when your financial life is really not that complex at all. But those young dentists especially, we get out of the gates as soon as they graduate and say, we need to start establishing good habits right now. And again, I'm not saying part of that is not, you can't do anything fun and purchase anything that's going to bring you enjoyment. It's not that at all, but it's getting clean, organized, and starting with good habits as soon as you can. With that too, there's a lot of value when you talk about insurance, personal, business. It's a matter of time, especially for those that buy a practice, where you go from having a few insurance policies between like your home and auto, umbrella policy, life insurance, disability. Then you buy a practice and add a handful of more policies, and that's a source of pain and frustration for almost any dentist we meet, is just trying to make sense of and keep track of all the insurance policies they have. And we have some. I was talking to one earlier today and he's the extreme case. He's got multiple residences. He's got multiple toys, snowmobiles and boats, etc. He's got over 40 insurance policies with different companies, and it's literally, it's impossible, even when you've got 10 or 15. So something like what you see here, just some type of summary, bringing it all together, committing to reviewing on a minimum an annual basis, considering that, insurance needs will change, your situation will change. This is something that's huge. This next chart here, this is the financial planning pyramid. It's not something that I invented. I didn't create this slide, but it's just an idea and concept that you want to go in order. Clients graduate from dental school. A lot of them say, well, I just graduated, I made a couple paychecks, and now I need to start doing something. I need to start investing my money. I need to start buying things. I need to start buying rental properties, or doubling down on my debt, or tripling down on my debt. What do I do? Well, eventually a lot of those things will make all the sense in the world. But first things first, we tell clients we're a protection first agency. We want to make sure all the bases are covered. So you get out of school, you already have insurance. You should, at least. And in order to start practicing, you need to get your malpractice. Disability is not mandatory, but advisable. If you have a family or some different needs, there's life insurance. Because you're now a doctor, there's some other insurances that you're going to have to look at. An umbrella insurance policy with your home and auto. You need to be looking at the liability limits. So there's a lot that goes into it, but that all plays into that bottom layer there, which also includes not just insurance policies, but wills and trusts. If you get out of school, get a job, and you're an independent contractor, you go buy a practice, then your business entity, that plays into it as well, the protection. Are you going to be an LLC, an S corporation, or just in general, do you even know to start a corporation or not? And the protection that you would get through that. So this picture here, as you graduate and become a doctor, like it or not, there's potentially always something lurking around the corner. And it could be that, hey, you're going to get sick. You could become disabled. Someone could be out to get you. It could be a patient, could be eventually an employee. It could be a neighbor, if there's any type of, or just some random person that you or your wife or eventually your children run into in a car accident. And so we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to convince young dentists that because they're now a doctor that they carry more risk, but that's the reality of it all. So one of the more extreme cases that, and sad cases that we've dealt with is, this is a client who, as you see, had 4 kids, was part owner in 3 different dental practices in Idaho. And at one point, he and his wife, who you see there, and their 2 friends, on a Sunday, were heading back home from Wyoming in a small plane. It was a snowy day. Plane took off and immediately crashed. This is the plane. There were no survivors. And so that in and of itself was, obviously terrible and tragic. And we've had a lot of bad things happen and seen a lot of bad things happen, but this ranks, at the top of the worst that we've experienced. We worked with thousands of dentists. And what was tough was just, helping the family deal with it. But a couple weeks after it happened, I was talking to his brother, who said, it's one thing, we're trying to grieve and we're trying to focus on that, but there's so much clutter to go through. There's emails and letters and documents and files. We're trying to figure out, we don't know what's what. There's no will. There's no trust. And so again, we're trying to grieve, but at the same time, there's all this red tape and paperwork. And there was question of, where are the kids going to go? Well, I guess a question I had is, where would the parents have wanted the kids to go? And at that point, no one would know. And it really didn't matter, because the court steps in and makes certain decisions. And it's since then, and I certainly always want to give good advice to clients and help them follow through what they need to do. But it's certainly helped me step up my game and being I don't want to say forceful, but a little more persistent in helping clients, put the things together and in place that need to be put in place to avoid situations like this. And Steve Anderson, years ago, he put out a Mentor of the Month, a webinar. It's called Expect the Best, but Prepare for the Worst. And so our message to clients is we talk about things like this, and we're not trying to employ scare tactics, because we could do that all day long with pictures and stories that I have, with statistics. But as I said earlier, the reality is that there's potentially always something lurking. And the good news is that we have, as I said, we work with thousands of dentists, and the majority of the conversations, the interactions we have involve conversations with clients talking about how great things are going, how they just added to the family, or they just bought their dream house, or they just finished their best month ever, their best year ever. And so we have every reason to be confident and positive, as that title of that Mentor of the Month was. We can expect the best, but we do have to just sometimes take a step back and make sure all the bases are covered. And so specifically just kind of talking through, so you graduate from dental school, and those listening probably have already graduated or close to it. And you're hit, usually all those that have graduated can relate, in the last 3 or 4 months, you get bombarded with insurance. People coming into school, many get kind of high pressured or backed into a corner with deadlines and talk of discounts. And you just, sometimes just to get rid of someone, you buy the disability policy or the malpractice, and you wait 4 or 5 years before you figure out what you have. Well, this is just a list of, we don't need to go through and explain them all. But on the personal side, these are insurance policies that could or would apply to you. Life, disability, et cetera. And then on the business side, if you end up buying into or buying a practice, a lot of these will come into play. And that's why I was saying earlier, before you know it, almost overnight, you're going to be inundated with a list of, or a pile of insurance policies that mean nothing to you, that you may, I got this one so I could start practicing. I got these 3 or 4 so I could get that loan from the bank. But at some point, you want to know what it is you have, why you have it. Is it still appropriate? Am I getting a good deal? And that's important. It's important to know. This is just an example. As we work with clients, this is a disability sheet that we put together. One piece of advice that's important to know is that I'll give you is with insurance, for any product that you're needing, there's a market for it. There's sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different companies and different options. And although I'm sure anyone listening doesn't necessarily want to become an expert on insurance, has no intention or strategically is avoiding the idea of knowing too much about it, it is good to be educated on, and when you're looking to purchase something, it's good to be educated on what's available, why would one be different than the other, better than the other. And even though in the end, when you implement something 6 months later, I'm confident you won't be able to, you may not even remember the name of the company. You always want to be able to go back to the process and know that you can be comfortable and confident, have the peace of mind that you took the time to be educated, you learned about what was available, and you implemented what was the most appropriate for you and your family.
Nice. Good.
Something that kind of random slide. I wanted to make sure I made this point, and part of it's to justify the horrible decision that I made years ago.
Yeah.
There was a company that, and Stuart, this could have been, had it all come to pass, this could have been right up your alley. Years ago, there was a company that actually started in Utah that had this keychain trainer concept, and they had some bigger name trainers involved in it. And I was kind of suckered into or talked into helping with the product launch, which involved investing some money, And the trade-off was, it was a 90-day deal that I would get about, I think it was 13% in some stock shares. And, at the time, when I considered that the money they're asking for was sitting in savings, earning nothing, it seemed like a low or no risk proposition. So I talked to the CEO, I talked to the CFO, looked into it. They even sent me one of the trainers, and I thought, okay, let's do this. And, in 3 months, I'll get my money back plus interest, and I'll have some stock shares. Well, 3 months passed, and I kind of forgotten about it. And so a little bit after the 3-month mark, I reached out and just kindly wanted an update. And for the next few weeks, it was, hey, it's coming. We're working on it, and XYZ is going on.
No.
What's that?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah. So I was not too concerned, but then they actually sweetened the deal. They moved the interest. It was about 32 or 33% return on that same money, and they doubled the stock shares. So I thought, hey, again, this was earning pretty much nothing in my savings account, so I'm not that concerned. So another 3, 4, 5 months passed, and I'm trying not to be too paranoid about it, but at the same time, there's that thought had long since crept in my mind of the only thing you might be getting out of this is a nice shiny stock certificate and a keychain trainer that will ultimately be worthless. And as you can imagine, story ended, not favorably for me. And company, they did their best, but it never made it off the ground. And somewhere I still have that trainer, but it's not worth nearly the amount of money I put in there. So the only consolation though I get out of that, it's really if I sit and dwell on it, it gets more and more painful. I could probably even muster up a tear down my face for having been suckered into that. But the only consolation that I get is that I do think that I've helped through that dumb experience many clients flinch or think twice or ask questions when it comes time to, because everyone's going to have their turn. And for many, sometimes it's going to feel like every other day that someone's approaching you with something, a get rich quick deal, a can't miss opportunity. And it's kind of easy to jump on board, especially if it's someone that that you're related to, or maybe you kind of feel guilty about, hey, this is my brother who's struggling. But when it's something that you're not familiar with, that you don't know anything about, it's safe to say it's probably a bad idea. And until you can be clearly convinced otherwise, to have that be the prevailing thought and guide for your actions is advisable. So when all said and done, if I knew that dozens or even hundreds of clients, because of my experience with this, had license and the sense to think twice and maybe steer clear of some of these things, then I can progressively, as I move away from it, can feel a lot better. But that's just a caution. When you're a doctor, whether you're a couple months in, 10 years in, 20 years in the eyes of your family, in the eyes of the public, it's kind of all the same. You're just this endless supply of money. And some have good intentions, but they themselves don't really know what they're doing. So you just have to be aware. What you don't want is to spend, you've spent to this point a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get through school. And then you get into practice and you continue to make your hard-earned money. You don't want to just do that and then go lose it in someone else's bad idea. So I hope that that does some good. I'd like to think so, or convince myself that that's the case.
Well, what was Sean? He's barely jumping. It's incredible.
Well, and this just shows you, it's basketball comes easy when you're 7'6", and there's no reason why you can't dunk and block shots and be successful and make millions of dollars. As this relates to the dentists we work with, going back to that picture of everyone in dental school excited, there's no reason to go through. Everyone's going to have their challenges. If you buy a practice and you have to manage employees and maybe deal with a partner, there's going to be struggles. There's going to be bad days. We get that. You're not immune to that. But overall, I'm more than convinced that, the road to financial clarity, financial security, retirement, et cetera, can be full of fun and can be relatively easy. Again, when you consider the type of income that the dentists make or capable of making, it shouldn't be that hard, or it certainly shouldn't be half as hard as others make it. So that's always been my passion and goal in working with, especially the young dentists, is we're happy to work with someone who's in their 50s or 60s and feeling like there's no hope, and try to do whatever we can to steer them back to the right path and help make up for lost time. But we're mostly passionate about working with the younger dentist crowd who maybe they've made a mistake or two, but otherwise there's kind of a clean slate there with years ahead, and with, I think, every reason to have all the hope in the world.
Yeah. Great, Rob. Well, I trust you. That's why we, brought you on. We've been friends for a long time now in Crown Council, and I hope these young docs who are watching or listening will heed your advice. And obviously you're putting yourself out there to communicate with them. So these young doctors, I hope, will reach out to you with any questions. Is that okay? I mean, how you're not off limits, are you? I mean, they can call your cell phone or email you.
Oh no, absolutely. I would love to help anyone out. Any questions, concerns, I'm here. That you see the contact information there. Feel free to reach out using any of the above there.
Very good. Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Young dentists can see at the annual event. Hopefully we'll have you on a mastermind call where they could ask you questions. But for now, thank you so much for sharing your own wisdom and knowledge. And I was kind of checking the boxes myself as we were working through some of that stuff. So this has been good. I appreciate it.
Hey, happy to do it. Thanks, Jeff.